This is the Advent of Code Day 3 solution in Rust. So today we're repacking rucksacks. Our rucksacks have two compartments, and in those compartments we can put the lowercase letters A through Z and uppercase letters A through Z, but we aren't allowed to put the same item in both compartments for one rucksack. So if we had one rucksack where we have the lowercase letter P in both compartments, that would be invalid, and we'd need to reorganize that rucksack. So for the first part of this problem, we're given our inputs as a list of characters. So the first half of that list tells us what's in the first compartment, and then the second half tells us what's in the second compartment. And if we have any overlap between those two lists, we want to flag that for reorganization. And the total score we want to calculate for this is a priority score, which is taking the lowercase letters, converting them to numbers 1 through 26, uppercase to 27 through 52, and totaling up all of the characters that shouldn't be there to get our score. So this kind of overlap problem, where we want to find the things that are in both sides of two sets effectively, sounds like a set intersection. So let's jump into our IDE and start coding. So the first thing we want to do is take our input lines, the rucksacks, split those into two halves, the two compartments, and then compute a hash set for each compartment so that we can compare the two compartments. So let's transform our input, map, and we'll go line by line. Start by unwrapping the line, and then we can split it into two halves. So line.split at line.length divided by 2, so split it in the middle. You've got to be careful using this length function for strings. It gives you back the byte length rather than the length that you might see if this was Unicode characters. So it works here because we're working with ASCII, but got to be careful with that. So first and second. So that's our two compartments. Then we can take our first compartment and get a sequence of characters from inside that string, and then we can convert that to a hash set using from iterator. And we want to do that for both our first and second compartment. So let's copy that and change that to second, and then Rust won't figure out the type here, so let's tell it. So that's a tuple of hash set on char, and there are two of them. So copy that, copy, paste, there we go. So then next we want to run through each of our sets, compute an overlap for them, and then we will need to compute a value for the characters that are overlapping. So let's figure out that function next. So let's create a toValue function, which takes a character as a byte and returns a number for it. So we've got two different cases, either we're uppercase or lowercase, and unfortunately the way that we've been given these numbers, they're kind of out of order because lowercase comes higher in the ASCII table than uppercase does, but we want a lower value for lowercase. So we'll have to do a bit of thinking here. So if character is ASCII lowercase, then we can subtract off the byte value of A and add 1. So that'll give us 0 for the character A when we compute their difference, and then add 1, so A will be 1, all the way up to 26, sorry. Otherwise, we must have an uppercase character, so we'll take our character, subtract off the byte A, and add 27 to get the right initial value for capital A, and then we want to return these as an I32. As I32. So now let's use this function to compute our score. So we'll iterate through our rucksacks. We'll map the values. So this is a tuple of first and second. So we can compute the intersection between the two. Intersection of second. So these are the characters that are appearing in both the first and second compartment. Convert that to an iterator. Map it. Then for each character, we can use our toValue function. toValue. And we'll convert our character to a U8. It's coming through as a char. Then we can sum up those values. And Rust doesn't figure out the type here, so we're just going to tell it that it's an I32 we want. And then we can sum all of those values for each rucksack. So this inside map computes the sum for each rucksack. Overall, we want to sum for all the rucksacks, and then we can call that our priority score, which is an I32, and we can print that out. Let's run that and see what we get. So we'll run it with cargo run. Okay, and we get a priority score of 7674. And while we're here, let's also cargo format the project, because we've got quite a few long lines in there. And then if we jump over to the Advent of Code website, let's check our result. So I'll paste in the score we got. And that's correct. So we can move on to part 2. Part 2 looks a little bit more complicated than it is at first. So each group of 3 elves, so taking batches of 3 working down the input file, have one unique item between them, which is their badge. So there'll be exactly one unique item. So say in one of the 2 compartments, for each elf in a batch of 3, a group of 3, they will have, for example, the capital letter B, unique to all 3 rucksacks. So that tells us that's their badge. We're being asked to find out what the badge is for each group of elves, and then they need to take those badges out to put stickers on them, authenticity stickers. So we're going to compute in the same way as we did in the first time, the effort score to take all those badges out based on the character value for what the badge is. So let's jump in and start coding. So there are a few things to take care of here. The first thing we want to worry about is getting these groups of 3 elves together. So let's take our rucksacks and group them into 3s. So this array chunks function, it's available only on Nightly, and even there it's unstable. So you have to switch your toolchain to Nightly to be able to use it. So we'll take groups of 3 elves, we'll map, call that group. Okay, and then we don't care anymore about the compartments, we just care about the total set of characters that the elf is carrying. So let's deal with that. So we will iterate over our group, and then for each element in the group we're going to map it. So at the moment it's a compartment thing, so it's our tuple of first and second compartment. So we want to take the union of those 2, union with second, and then we don't want it in that format. That'll give us back an iterator. We want to pass forward a hash sec, so we're going to want to work with this again. So let's do a map first, which is going to let us clone the values in here. Rust makes us be explicit about the copying of values, and by default all of these map operations give us back a helpful iterator and reference to the values that were internal. From iterator. There we go. So we've copied the internal values, and it's not happy here. That's fine. It's just because we haven't told it what type we want yet. We've got some more steps to do. So we're going to iterate through that again. So now we've got our rucksacks represented as just one set rather than 2 sets for the 2 compartments. We want to reduce that. So we want to find out across the set of 3 elves, or group of 3 elves, what is the one character that's unique. So we want to do an intersection between all 3 sets. So reduce takes an accumulator, which will be a hash set of characters. And then it also takes an item, so the item we're currently working with. So we can do accumulator.intersection with item, and that needs to be a reference to the item. And then similarly to just above, we want to turn this into a hash set again, rather than an iterator over the result values. And we want to copy the internal values. Actually, we could have done that the same way. Let's do that. That's clearer to do a copy. Okay, so that gives us back, we can unwrap that. That gives us back our badge. So let's give that a name. So although it's an iterator, it technically is a single value in there because we expect the input to be valid. So we're not going to check that, we'll just assume it is. So elf badge, we have to iterate it because it's multi-value, even though we think it's 1. We're going to map it, and this will be our toValue to get the value for that character out as U8. And then we can compute a sum, because although we think this is one value, again, we're working with a list. There we go. So that gives us the value back for each individual group of elves, and then overall we want to sum that to get our final result. And we can ask for that as a variable, badge score, and we will need to tell Rust the type. Good. And then we can print that out. So badge score. Let's check if that builds. We don't think it will at first because of this array chunks, but let's jump over and see what happens. So we'll build it and see what happens. And we get this complaint back about use of unstable library feature array chunks, and it tells us to add this attribute at the top of the crate to enable this feature. So let's do that now. It's important where this goes. This needs to be the first thing in the file. So we'll pop this up top, and the IDE complains it hasn't quite realized we're on the nightly toolchain yet, but that will allow us to use this array chunks. So let's build that again and see what our output is going to be. So let's check it builds first. And it does now, so let's run it. And it's giving us back a badge score of 2805. So let's jump over to the website and see if that's the right answer. So we'll drop that in there and see what we get back. Fantastic, right answer. So that is first 3 days completed. I will see you tomorrow for the next challenge.